Hello, everybody, and welcome to our February Lunch and Learn. My name is Rae Glaser. I'm the director of the New York State Kinship Navigator. I've got 11:59 on my clock, so I've started recording the webinar. We're going to let folks join. Just a couple of housekeeping things first. First of all, as I just said, this webinar will be recorded. So this, along with any visuals on today's presentation, we will provide to you within the next week. It will also be available on the Navigator's YouTube video. Um, Anybody in the webinar today, you are muted. So if you have any questions for me or for our presenter, please feel free to use the chat function. I'll be monitoring that and we will answer questions as best we can in real time as they come up. I do want to thank the Times Union for their meteor sponsorship for our February, March, and April and May Lunch and Learn programs. Very much appreciated. Their support helps us reach new audiences with the information about the Kinship Navigator, kinship issues, all of our partners, and expand our knowledge base for kinship care. So I'm going to give a very brief overview. First of all, of what actually today the KinCare Coalition is doing. And then I will turn it over to our presenter from Schuyler Center, Crystal Charles, to give an overview of the state of New York's children. So like I said, my name is Rae Glaser. I'm the director of the New York State Kinship Navigator program. I think everybody on the webinar is very familiar with the Navigator program. We provide information, referral, and education to kinship caregivers, prospective kinship caregivers, as well as kinship professionals across the state. If you're not familiar with us, I'll drop our website and our phone number right in the chat so you can get some more information. Today, I do want to focus just a little bit more on the other arm of the Kinship Navigator, which is providing leadership for the King Care Coalition. The King Care Coalition is a group of individuals that are very interested in kinship issues across the state. It is made up of the Kinship Navigator, some of our local kinship programs, and I am the chair of this, and I co-chair with St. Catherine's, which is a program based in the Capital Region, and Catholic Charities Buffalo, which is Western New York, and the southern tier part of Western New York, where we have good conversation about kinship policy issues, best practices for kinship programming. Right now, we are in the throes of our policy piece of the year, where we ask the legislature to kindly refund us for the good work that we do. And when we're looking at our funding streams, we are looking at the Kinship Navigator program and we are looking at the local kinship programs. So our policy ask will be coming up. We will be sending that out with the King Care Coalition kinship tidbits that we send out every single month. If you do not receive that piece of literature in your email, feel free to sign up right on the Navigator homepage. We send that out every single week that gives information about what's going on in kinship. That includes our Kin Care Coalition meetings, which are the third Tuesday of every month from 1 to 2. Once you sign up for one meeting, they are reoccurring every single month. So feel free to join us, where we have some good conversations about what's going on with the state of kinship care. And then that also will give you information about our lunch and learns. Those are usually every third Thursday of the month, but due to President's Week and school holidays and everything, we ended up pivoting that for the month of February. It will be resuming our normal schedule. March 19th is our next Lunch and Learn, where we will be having presenter from Parent to Parent, which is a fantastic organization that provides information statewide. So look for that in tidbits. Look for that button coming up next week on the Navigator's homepage, and we will provide you with information as best we can about all of these events coming up in New York State. I don't want to take too much time today. I do want to turn it over to our presenter, Crystal Charles, our Senior Policy Manager for the Schuyler Center. We've worked with the Schuyler Center for, oh man, Crystal, I don't know, it's been over a decade at this point. They are a fantastic partner, and I look forward to hearing about your policy agenda for 2026. Over to you, Crystal.
Thanks, Ray. I'll just expand. I'm a senior policy manager at Schuyler Center, and I focus on child welfare and reducing child poverty. So today I'll be going over the latest data on children and families in New York State, and then touch a bit on where we are now in the annual state budget process and what's going on with state funding for kinship programs. Schuyler Center is a 153-year-old nonprofit organization dedicated to policy analysis and advocacy in support of public systems that meet the needs of disenfranchised populations, including people living in poverty. We believe in a future in which every child across New York State thrives and every family has the resources they need. We know it is possible. We take a data-driven approach to identify systemic problems, generate policy solutions, and hold government accountable. Our 2026 State of New York's Children Data Book provides a data snapshot of the well-being of New York's children and families. Our children make up a fifth of New York's diverse populations, possessing richly varied perspectives and unlimited potential. There are more than 4 million children in New York State, 1 million of them under age 5, and 38% of New York State's children are in immigrant families. Over 18% of our children are in families experiencing poverty, and poverty disproportionately impacts Native, Black, Hispanic, and multiracial families. Recent years have brought important New York State policy change toward the future we desire. This most recent year has also brought significant headwinds from the federal government. Schuyler Center led the movement for the Child Poverty Reduction Act in 2021. As a result, the governor and legislature committed to reducing child poverty by 50% by 2031. They've taken action to make good on that promise with policies and funding for the child tax credit, food, childcare, housing, health coverage, and public assistance. We're far from our goal, but estimates suggest a combination of these recent policies will reduce child poverty by nearly 20% if the policies are robustly implemented and take up a strong. These poverty reduction estimates do not take into account recent and massive federal reductions in assistance for states, localities, and people, which are disproportionately impacting low-income people, including children. We're going to talk about a lot of wins today, but we'll start with the child tax credit. We're in a tough moment, but we've been at this for a long time. Schuyler Center has advanced tax credits for working families since the 1990s, when in 1994 we helped secure New York State's Earned Income Tax Credit and developed a program called the Helping Hand Toolkit to make sure people accessed it. In 2000, we secured an increase in the state earned income tax credit from 25% to 30% of the federal credit. In recent years, we've won major improvements to the state's child tax credit, an increase in the amount from a maximum of $330 per child to a maximum of $1,000 per young child, so under 4, and $500 per older child, including previously excluded infants and toddlers in the credit, and importantly, changing the structure so very low-income families can get the full amount of the credit. This year, We think it is important that the state invest in free tax preparation assistance and a public awareness campaign to make sure people claim the tax credits they're due. Schuyler Center has fought for investments in childcare and pre-K since the 1990s as well, leading the Pre-K Now and Childcare That Works campaigns that helped build investment in early care and learning in New York. In recent years, we co-lead and serve as the fiscal and staff home of the Empire State Campaign for Childcare, and I've worked hand in hand with many of you to build momentum for childcare that is available for every family, no matter where they live. Last week, well, really last month in January, Governor Hochul with Mayor Mamdani on her side committed to the vision for universal childcare. Throughout our history, starting in 1872 through the present day, Schuyler Center has analyzed the data, working in and with communities, shined the light on neglected people and issues, and fought for thoughtful investments to enhance prevention, improve health, and make New York the best place to grow up and live. The data within this data book support those same goals. So we start off with some good news. Here's some bad news. Um, we cannot talk about the state of New York's children in 2026 without acknowledging that federal funding cuts, administrative and other actions threaten to make affordability challenges much worse, particularly for low-income families and immigrant families who have been singled out for the harshest treatment in federal funding cuts and administrative actions. 38% of New York children are living in immigrant households, meaning these federal actions targeting immigrant New Yorkers threaten more than a third of New York children. As the federal cuts imposed by the July 2025 Federal Tax and Reconciliation Bill, also called H.R. 1, are implemented and other federal actions take effect, 1.7 million New York families are expected to lose some or all of their SNAP benefits, the nation's largest, most effective anti-hunger program, including an additional 41,000 lawfully present immigrant New Yorkers, including refugees and asylees, are newly excluded from SNAP. H.R. 1 changed the child tax credit rules, now requiring at least one parent must also have a social security number, will lead to an estimated 226,000 U.S. citizen and legal permanent resident children in New York to lose their federal child tax credit, representing a loss of up to $2,200 per child, a huge financial blow to families. Families fearful of aggressive, sweeping immigration enforcement have withdrawn from benefits to which they are entitled, and many daily activities like school and work, introducing stress and deprivation for these families. And many lawfully present immigrants are no longer eligible for Medicaid, although children and pregnant women are largely protected. Finally, in January, the federal government froze billions in federal funds for core anti-poverty programs that provide essential supports to low-income families, asserting without evidence that this was prompted by widespread fraud. Just days after the federal freeze was announced, New York, along with several other states, won a temporary injunction ending the freeze for now. Okay, we're back to good news. This year, Governor Hochul proposed, with Mayor Mamdani by her side, a $1.7 billion investment in pre-K and 3K expansions to care for New York City, universal pilot projects outside of New York City, and a plan to achieve statewide universal childcare. The plan has many features that Schuyler Center has been advocating to achieve for years. Perhaps most importantly, the governor's plan prioritizes low-income families in the rollout to universal childcare by making a $1.2 billion recurring investment in the Child Care Assistance Program, or CCAP, representing a 65% increase to the program, which is currently funded at about $1.8 billion annually. Here's what this expansion will mean to the tens of thousands of families newly able to access CCAP if this pronounced investment is included in the final enacted budget. A family with two parents earning the minimum wage and one infant in home-based childcare would see their childcare bill drop from more than $16,000 a year to about $350 a year, or less than $30 a month. There is much more to celebrate in this historical proposal and to build from. With costs outpacing the cost of in-state college tuition and being the biggest expense other than housing, childcare is a key component to family stability and the ability to afford living in New York State. While the number of families eligible for the Child Care Assistance Program has grown exponentially, the funding needed to serve these families has not risen in support in proportion to that demand. That has left 29 counties plus New York City with families on wait lists for CCAP or unable to renew their enrollment in the program. It has destabilized the childcare providers serving these families who already struggle to earn a living wage. Coupled with the cuts and threats from the federal government, childcare is in an unstable place. Childcare workers are amongst the lowest paid workers, earning less than 96% of occupations in New York State. This has resulted in a struggle to recruit and retain staff, contributing to the childcare deserts across the majority of the state. For these investments to flourish, funds must be allocated to compensate the underpaid childcare workforce. It will not be possible to scale up to universal childcare without growing the workforce, and this is a sector that has a great deal of attrition and turnover, in no small part because of the low wages. So we're pivoting a little bit to dental coverage. Um, we all know cavities are some of the most common chronic childhood conditions, but most cavities are preventable. Less than half of New York kids on Medicaid get dental care annually, despite being insured. In many areas, the barrier isn't insurance coverage, it's provider shortages. This isn't about coverage, it's about capacity. Too few providers accept Medicaid, especially in rural and low-income areas, and as a result, families postpone care, often ending up in emergency rooms. A recent law expands where dental hygienists can practice, excuse me, which demonstrates progress towards workforce solutions. The child welfare system receives thousands of reports every year, but they are often not about suspicions of abuse and neglect. They are about concerns for a family's well-being. The core challenges facing most families are persistent food, financial, or housing insecurity. Too many families are caught up in New York's child welfare system. Over 143,000 New York families were subject to Child Protective Services investigations in 2024, with most New York counties investigating families at a higher rate than the national average. Ultimately, after weeks to months of invasive investigation procedures, over three-quarters of reports to the state central register are unfounded. One child welfare win from December is the governor signing the Anti-Harassment and Reporting Act into law. With this act, thousands of families across the state will be protected from the baseless and unnecessary investigations that come from anonymous calls to the state central register. New York has a rich history in keeping kids covered in Medicaid and Child Health Plus. The numbers continue to tell the story. 44% of all New York State children and nearly 80% of children living in poverty are covered by our public health insurance programs. Sadly, recent federal changes may threaten this trajectory. In 2025 alone, the federal government canceled the previous administration's approval of 0 to 6 continuous coverage for Medicaid, cut billions of dollars from Medicaid, which will force the state and our healthcare systems to make decisions about how to maintain coverage and access with far less federal funding. They pulled support for services for certain groups of immigrants living in New York and enacted more frequent renewals and work reporting requirements that will force individuals and families to complete much more paperwork to keep their coverage. Luckily, there are options available to help mitigate the potential losses. The governor and the legislature must take a serious look at some of our recommendations related to Medicaid, including funding and investing in Medicaid and Child Health Plus, implementing automated enrollment and renewals, and increasing funding for navigators and assisters who are trained and certified to help people enroll in public coverage. And this is a relatively newer topic area for us that we've recently built out our expertise on, which is food insecurity. Um, it remains widespread across New York State, affecting rural and urban communities alike, and disproportionately impacting households with children, Hispanic, and Black New Yorkers. In fact, data published in January confirms what we feared. Food insecurity in New York State increased in 2024. HR 1's cuts and policy changes to the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, will increase food insecurity at a time when families can least afford it. Over 2.9 million New Yorkers participate in SNAP, and many face direct harm. These harms include benefit amounts that won't keep pace with grocery costs due to thrifty food plan restrictions, 300,000 households newly subject to work reporting requirements, and nearly 41,000 refugees and asylum seekers now ineligible for the program. So that covers all of our data that we have to share. It's a little bit more than usual because of all the federal impacts hitting the states, both this year and in coming years. But specifically related to our budget in New York State, um, I just want to say that we're very happy to be partners and supporters of the Kinship Navigator and KinCare Coalition. A lot of our collaboration happens during the budget process to help secure funding for the Navigator and Kinship caregiver support programs throughout the state. And just to get us all on the same page, of course, we're in the midst of the budget process right now. The governor released her budget proposal last month, which we analyzed here at Schuyler Center relative to our priorities. Next, the state assembly and senate will release their budget proposals called One Houses in early March, a week or two from now. Then negotiations between the governor and the legislature begin and go through the rest of March until the budget is due April 1st, though it has been late a lot. Um, there are multiple points during this process where the coalition can make their voice heard, but for now, I'll focus on where we are. Kinship funding is strongly supported by the chairs of the Assembly and Senate Children and Families Committees, so we will be looking for them to restore funding in their upcoming one houses. Then our attention will be focused on the negotiation phase in March. During this time, we can reach out to legislative leaders as well as the governor's office to ensure kinship funding makes it into the final budget, which should be released April 1st. As for the state of kinship funding right now, this is what the governor proposed last month for the state budget. Permanency resource centers or PRCs support both adoptive and kinship families by providing services and connecting families to resources such as peer support, mentoring, navigation for cross-system needs, therapeutic services, counseling, or respite care. The governor proposed funding PRCs at the same amount as last year's budget. The governor did not propose any funding for local kinship support programs. The legislature usually adds this, um, which is 1.9 million. The governor also proposed funding the Kinship Navigator at $100,000 less than last year's budget. The legislature usually adds the difference here too. As you can see, it's key to reach out to both the legislature and the governor to ensure kinship programs and the Kinship Navigator are fully funded this year. All right. Thank you everyone for listening, and I'll pass it back to you, Rae.
Yeah, Crystal, thank you so much. And I just want to speak on the last slide you had there with the kinship programs. What Crystal shared is something that is very common every year. So we've had really good luck with the permanency resource centers being funded this past year, to an even greater extent with more families that can be served to the point where we can now have a kinship program in every county, which is amazing. Those local kinship support programs, it is very customary for the 338,000 to be added into the budget. And then we do have to educate. We use the word educate instead of advocate for the extra dollars. And the same thing with the Kinship Navigator program. It's always funded at $220,500, and we always ask for an additional 100,000. We do have a question coming in the chat about sharing stories from our programs with local assembly members and senators. I do know from a kinship perspective, we find that very, very helpful. That as the kinship policy ask comes out, the budget asks that we're always looking for folks to share those stories about what we do. Is that something that you find on more of a global level as well?
Yes, definitely. Stories are always helpful to kind of paint a picture of where this money is coming from, right? So they're looking at it as just numbers on a budget line in a sea of legal text, right? So it helps to them to be able to match those numbers to real experiences.
Yeah.
And it helps them remember when things get down to the wire to include that funding.
100%, absolutely. And I think, it's very interesting. I just gave an overview at the KinCare Coalition meeting on Tuesday. Some of this policy work can be a little bit daunting, in the beginning. I'm really glad that you took the time to walk us through what the process looks like. But we tend to see a lot of program folks that come on these calls and they're not quite sure what to do. All this sounds great. How can I help? And the answer that I gave on Tuesday, is that, once that information's out, what we really need to do is make sure that those that are in power to move the needle on the budget hear what we do. All the information that you were giving out, I was nodding my head because when it comes to things like dental, my children are on Child Health Plus. And it's fantastic that it's covered. But even in Monroe County, there are very few providers that accept the insurance. So when it comes to things like kinship care, when it comes to dental coverage, when it comes to anything, um, they need to hear what's happening boots on the ground. So when it comes to kinship care, look out for some more information on how you can help locally. I do see another question coming in the comment from Jilene, and I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. In terms of preparation for PowerPoints, I'm going to have you email me directly on that. I'll make sure that I provide that in the chat. And then we have another comment coming in from Tamara. PRC case manager in Steuben and Schuyler County, and it's been really well received by the families that you've worked with. Yeah, and that's what we need to hear. That's what they need to hear, not us. I'm sorry. So if you do want to be part of that, Tamara, sign up for our tidbits. We're going to be leaning pretty heavily on folks from the PRCs and the local kinship programs in the next 6 weeks because we want to make sure that we are heard. We all know that the work that we do is wonderful. We all know that it's cost effective and that it increases that stability and permanency in families. And now we just need to make sure that we continue to get funded for it. So thank you very much, Crystal, for joining us today and for presenting and give us the information. Really, your information goes hand in hand with ours. So I'm super glad that we have each other to be supportive with our endeavors when we come to ask for money and ask for initiatives to help children and families in New York State.
Me too. Thank you.
All right. I'm going to drop my email right in the chat for Jolene. Feel free to reach out. And this information will be available to you within the next week or so. The recording and Crystal, if you're willing, we'd love to see your slides so that we can hand those out. All right. Thank you, everybody. Again, sign up for our tidbits and information on next month's Lunch and Learn. March 19th will be available on our website next week. Have a great day.